Good morning, everyone. So today I want to take a deeper look into cameras for photogrammetry. Now, if you're new here, this is what I usually do. I go out into nature, do some scans, and bring them into Unreal Engine. And in this episode, I was curious to see what a 24 megapixel camera could do compared to a 50 megapixel camera. Are there any benefits in using a higher resolution camera, or is it better to go with something that's just slightly less detailed? Now, there are some pros with using a 24 megapixel camera, and that's, first of all, it's the price. Those cameras are very much cheaper. It's also the processing power and the storage of all the images that you get. And that has to be contrasted with using a 50 megapixel camera where the quality could be quite a lot better. But that's what I want to find out in this episode. So let's dive into it and really do a careful analysis of how the quality versus performance and everything is between a 24 megapixel image and a 50 megapixel image.
Hello everyone. So I'm out sneaking around in my local forest here and I'm going to do some tests. So I've always been curious which camera is the best. So I have two cameras with me today that I'm going to try out. One is 24 megapixels and one is 50 megapixel, and it's a full frame format camera and a medium format camera. So I'm just going to find a suitable subject here, hopefully some kind of a stump with lots of mushrooms. I think I want a lot of details because I want to see if the medium format camera has anything over the full frame camera. Let me just talk you through the different cameras here. So we got a Nikon Zf here to the left. This is a 24 megapixel camera, and this is the Fuji GFX 50R, and it's a 50 megapixel camera. So it's not only the megapixels that makes a difference, so they both have a little bit of pros and cons to them. So let's take, for instance, this one here. This one's got absolutely fantastic IBIS. It's 7 stops, so you can easily handheld this and shoot when it's getting quite dark. Now, the important thing for photogrammetry is that you can handhold it with setting the shutter to 60 and then still shoot. If you go lower than that, you might often get blurry images anyway, but if you can do that confidently at 60, it's really nice. You can do a lot of situations then. So I've never used the tripod for this one. This one is purely handheld. Another thing that it has, go on the back, it's a nice flip out screen. So here we go, we have which makes it possible to tilt it like this. So this is pros and cons. It goes out to the left there, so it gets a bit annoying when you hold it in landscape mode like this. But quite often you will hold it in portrait mode and then you flip it out like this. And this is really fantastic. It means you can get really, really low to the ground, which this one can't. So the GFX, it's got a flip out screen like this, but you can't do it in portrait mode, which has turned out to be a little bit problematic actually. However, this one doesn't have any IBIS, so I always shoot this one on a tripod, or try as much as I can, which makes for stable shots, but it also makes that you can't really get to everywhere we want to go, and you lose the speed as well. So this one is a lot nimbler. You can just walk around the subject and shoot it as many times as you like. What the GFX has that the Nikon doesn't have is, of course, 50 megapixels, but also that it shoots in 4:3, and that's the size of the sensor. So normal cameras, they have a 3:2 sensor, which means that when you shoot in portrait mode, it's kind of thin and narrow. And that's actually a slight problem when you do photogrammetry. So this one has a much wider sensor, it's more square, which is perfect for what we are trying to do. Okay, so I set up the Nikon Zf here, and it is getting quite dark and gloomy, but that's quite often when you do photogrammetry, you get into these conditions. If you are in a forest like this, there is not that much sunlight as you think there are. So the settings I had to do is, I'm shooting at f5.6, ISO is 800, and I'm going all the way down to 1/30th in the shutter speed. So I'm really hoping that the IBIS in this one is going to pay off. Well, let's go. Let's try this. So first, I'm going to be really careful to just get the whole subject in. Okay, that's lap 1 done. Now what I usually do is have to get a little bit closer. So, and you can see here just how nimble this screen is, where you can just flip it in any direction. And I actually feel that the flip out screen like this turns out to be just the best for photogrammetry. So all of these things is something you have to think about when you are choosing your camera. It's not just the megapixels or things like that. To round it all off, I'm going to have to get low. So yet again, this is where the flip out screen comes into handy. So I can go all the way down here, point the camera up. And there we have it, it's done. So I think it's super fast to scan with the camera. So I set up the GFX here now, and see I'm shooting it in portrait mode. So what I got it set to now is a shutter speed of 8, because it's on the tripod. That's going to work out just fine. Still have an ISO of 800, and I got a aperture of f8, because this is a GFX, a medium format. 5.6 in full frame format is roughly, well, you have to count 2/3 of a stop to get an equivalent of the depth of field. So I set it to a little bit higher. 8 is gonna perform very well in this situation. So let's get to it. Okay, and now it's time for the most challenging part. That's getting low with this camera. So if it would just tilt up ever so slightly, this process here would be a lot easier. It's not that bad crawling around on your knees if you only do it for a couple of minutes, but imagine you're out for weeks at a time. So all of these little quality of life things becomes very important. But I'm going to get home, going to check out the images and see if 50 megapixels and a bigger sensor is winning over IBIS and a nimbler camera. Without wasting any time, let's take a look at what we got. So first up, it's the Nikon Zf, and it's the 24 megapixel scan here. And the first impressions is that it looks absolutely fantastic. Got all the details that I want, and nothing really missing. That's the thing with a nimble camera like this. You can really easily cover all the little nooks and crannies. So in this instance, I still have a few missed parts here. So with a more intentional scan, I could have nailed all of that as well. So I did kind of a basic scan, just a couple of loops around, and still got very good results. Well, let's see a little bit closer how it is. So you can see with the 24 megapixel camera that you don't really lack for anything when it comes to an object like this. Granted, it gets slightly fuzzy, the texture, but then you have to think also the texture, the diffuse texture, it's not always the most important one. It can be, you know, when you're taking away all the shadows and everything, it can look pretty bland and you don't get the amount of detail that you think you will have. So you can get away with a slightly lower resolution of the diffuse texture. It's not a big problem. What is important is to get a lot of detail out, so you can put that into the normal map or into the mesh itself. That's what really counts. And let's take a look at how it handles that. So you can see that with the leaves and things like that, I think it's doing a pretty good job here. But if you zoom in, when you have a complicated surface like this with lots of leaves and stuff, you're going to get these holes and things where it misses it. So I get a lot of that. And yeah, let's take a look here. So once you get in and start looking much closer to it, you can see that it is kind of falling apart. All of this here would have to be removed, maybe resculpted, but it's not that easy to sculpt leaves and mushrooms on the go, just like that. So there's no stem there, that's missing.
And let's take a look at these mushrooms here. Here you can see it's not that detailed, and they don't have a stem there at all. So that is a little bit the issue with a 24 megapixel. If you want really, really fine detail, it might not be the absolute best tool for that, because you are going to miss some. But then again, it's even with a higher resolution camera, you're going to miss a lot of detail. There's almost no scenario where it can handle this perfectly. So this have to be still some kind of an approximation, because thin leaves like this, you're just not going to get a good result of. And I think it's doing a pretty good job here. But it's also things like this. It is nice to capture, but it's also a nightmare to UV map. So it's one thing if you're doing it for movies, where you can keep these kind of textures here, where you got an auto UV map that you can use. Then it could be interesting to get all the detail you can. Or else for a game, all of this probably has to go or be remodeled anyways. So all in all, I think it's pretty good result. Let's take a look at the 50 megapixel camera, what it did. Okay, so here we have the 50 megapixel mesh. And first impressions is that it looks different. It's got different colors, so because it's a different camera. It looks kind of the same, but I can also see that I've missed a lot more. So did the same kind of loops, but I just didn't have the ability to reach high up and photograph down. So when you don't have a nimble camera with good IBIS, you just can't get everywhere you want. So this is where a camera like this loses out. Now, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the resolution. So a camera with 50 megapixels and super stable image stabilization might still be better. But first impressions like this when just looking around is that it looks a tiny bit sharper, but nowhere near the effect you would have wanted in order to go with so much higher resolution, because all of the time that you lose in processing and everything, I still think it might not be worth it. And if I zoom in here, you can see it's even hard to judge because I don't have the other mesh up at the same time, if it's softer or if it's sharper. But the difference is not huge. There is a bit sharper. I'm going to take some screenshots and we're going to compare them in Photoshop and see if there is any effect. But already like this, when you compare it and you can't really tell the difference between a 24 megapixel and a 50 megapixel, I guess that's a good sign that you should stick with the 24 megapixel. First of all, those cameras are a lot cheaper. Let's take a look here at this stick, for instance. So what happens also when you use a higher resolution camera is that often you take a lot fewer pictures, which I have done here as well, just because I couldn't reach everywhere. So I actually did get some misses here. It's cut off there. Let's see how the mushrooms are. Mushrooms are looking really good though. I think I get more detail in there, but still it's not nowhere near good enough. You don't get all the stems in there. They're still cut off. Now this I actually could probably solve in the field. I could go in and take double the amount of pictures and just really get in, try to cover every angle with where the mushrooms are. It's a lot of work, but if it's important, you'll do it. So looking around, I mean, it's just as great as the other one, except for the missing parts. Here we got this stick. Let's look at that. It's a great looking stick. Just a few missing parts there. Yeah, so all in all, I think judging it like this, there's not a huge gain going with the 50 megapixel, I have to say. I think I would stick with the 24. because it's so much easier to work with than the big one, the big camera. But I'm going to take some screenshots and we're going to take a look at it in Photoshop quickly. I think they're pretty similar. I do see a certain sharpness increase in the GFX, but nothing that's a deal breaker by any means. But it is sharper. Okay, let's zoom in a bit to see here. This is close up of those leaves, and if I flip to the GFX, yeah, I can clearly see there is more detail for sure when I look at it like this. And that is to be expected. But for all intents and purposes, it's probably, that detail is most likely overkill for most objects that you're going to scan. So that's why I think it is probably the better way to go with the 24, as I feel it like right now. Let's have one more example. I got this little mushroom here. It's a very extreme detail. This is the Nikon, the 24 megapixel, and this is the GFX. Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's quite a lot more detail in it for sure. But just judging from the shape of the mushroom, they're quite similar, with a slight increase in detail on the mushroom from the GFX. But that's still not good enough, I guess. So it's still not a huge deal. So I would still give my money to the 24 megapixel. So I think that kind of settles it for now, that 24 is probably more than enough. Now you have to say, you can't go too low. I think between 20 and 33 or whatever it is, it's pretty much the same. And then you go up to 50 megapixels, you got 50, and you got some that are 60 megapixels. And then you're going to see this type of increase, just a tiny bit sharper, but not a deal breaker. But then we have, of course, the 100 megapixel ones, and those I am kind of curious to see if it would do something else. Because what I am looking for, there are just certain instances where it would be nice to solve these really fine detail, to get some thin grasses and twigs out, and if those could come out perfect, it would be quite nice actually. Could be very valuable to have. But in this case, I'm going to probably stick to the Nikon Zf, but I have a few more tests I want to do. I took some more, I did take some more scans out there with the camera, so I'm going to take a look at those as well and just see how it looks like. Now I got to say that it's not only the amount of detail that you get from this. So there's also the issue of the dynamic range, which is very important when you extract the textures, because there is a point where you want to bake out all these shadows here. You don't want them in your mesh. You want it as flat as possible. And the higher the dynamic range is of the camera, the better. So the Nikon is quite good. It's got around... if you shoot it at base ISO, which is 100, it's going to have an easy 12 to 13 dynamic range steps, which counts as quite good. Now the GFX has got 14, which is pretty damn good. That's even better. So it means you can lift those shadows, those dark shadows comes up even a little bit more. It's another day, and I started shooting much earlier in the day, so I got a bit more good light to work with. So you only get so many hours when it is winter time. But winter is also a prime time for photo scanning. But you only got like 3-4 hours before it gets too dark. But let's see. So this is the Nikon Z, the 24 megapixel. We can check here what it did. So I got, when I solved it at max quality, I got 136 million triangles for this kind of a stump. Now, when you are working with this, you will end up with a high-res mesh. Maybe that's 40 million. That's kind of good. That will be where you extract your normal maps from. And the final product will not be more than 1 million polygons in in any case. So 136 is of course more than good enough. And it also generated 10 8K textures. So that says as well that that is quite a lot of texture information. And you can't, unless it's for film yet again, because then there is no limit to how many textures you can have. But if it's for a game, you would never want more than one 8K texture. If even that, this would be one 4K texture. So yet again, I think we're quite safe here. We are way oversampled with a 24 megapixel camera. But let's look at the detail here. If I zoom in, you can see it did a pretty good job. So this is also a little bit of an easier scan to do. It is kind of sluggish now because it's so high resolution and got so many textures in it. But I think it's pretty good. I did take the time to take quite a lot of images now from all kinds of directions because I was interested in how it would handle these mushrooms here. It's like a cluster of mushrooms. And as you can see, some of them are good, but it's also turning into a bit of a clump. Let's get this away for now. And still kind of usable, I think, but it's always tricky with mushrooms like this. If should just delete them and put in other mushrooms, hand-modeled mushrooms. But then that's a lot of things to work with. So you can see here, it is doing quite a good job, but there would also be quite a lot of repairing to do. But I think it looks pretty nice. And here we have the 50 megapixel scan, the GFX, and you can see it clocks in at 150 million. So not that much more than what I had with the Nikon Zf. And it actually only has 8K textures, whilst the 24 megapixel had 10 8K. Now this is because I had two very different approaches when I did this. So with the Nikon Zf, I tried to use its strength to its advantage, which means that I can go around and I can get a lot closer to objects and find all kinds of angles. Whilst you can't do that if you're on a tripod with the GFX, then you become more static. So here I have just walked in a circle in the classic way and not going down in taking pictures from every little angle. Now there are pros and cons with both approaches. So of course it's going to be kind of faster to just have a system where you walk in a circle around compared to if you just keep on taking images all the time. That will take a long time, and that's time that you might not always have. But the strength then with a higher resolution camera is that you can stand further away, and you can do that, whilst with a lower resolution camera you have to kind of get close in order to compensate for the lower resolution. So I hope that makes sense, but that's how I approach these. So in the end they're kind of the same resolution, not very far off. We can see here this one looks just as excellent as the other one, and it's now got full coverage everywhere. But I can see that it is definitely sharper, and the detail is absolutely fantastic. It's also a bit sluggish to move around. But no matter how you do it, you're always going to get these holes in leaves. But I think there are fewer holes in this mesh. And I do think this mushroom cloud here looks quite a lot better. It's got more shape to it. But it's almost as, no matter how good you get it, I mean, you can see you get all these little wrinkles in here. There's still going to be missing parts underneath there. It's, we'd have to do some serious sculpting to get that to work. But all in all, I do think the 50 megapixel camera looks quite a lot better. Back in Photoshop, and this is the Nikon Zf, the 24 megapixel one. Looking pretty good. It's quite the close-up. Got a lot of detail there. Let's see what the 50 MP is. Yeah. Oh yeah, well, yeah, it's a lot more detail in the 50 megapixel here, so it's showing its strength here in this scenario. Got a lot more detail on the leaves there. Yeah, that's something you can see clearly. You look at that leaf, and then you compare it to this leaf. It's quite a big difference, actually. So this is an extreme close-up of the mushroom. So you can see it's pretty much just a pea soup, this. Let's see what the 50 MP has to offer. And it's actually quite a lot better. It's actually pretty good. You see all these little wrinkles here that you didn't quite see before. So definitely much more detail in the mesh and in the texture as well. You can see here, for instance, this is the 24 megapixel, and here we have the 50, and you do get a lot more in there. But this is a very extreme close-up, and like I said, they had a similar resolution, around like 140 million. But definitely the 50 megapixel wins out here. But this is a very controlled subject that I had to shoot, and that's where it shows its strength. When I can shoot it and reach everywhere where I want, it will be better, of course. But the nimbleness of a small camera with great IBIS is worth quite a lot as well. But I think, after watching these, that the takeaway is still that the 24 megapixel is going to be good enough for almost all situations. And there might be some situations where you would want a bit more resolution. But that has to be very specific situations. And I can imagine that if you want something that is an object with lots of tiny details, it could be worth it. But for anything that is a bit bigger, you should probably stick with a 24 megapixel camera. I think that's the gold standard. First of all, those cameras are so much cheaper. We land solidly in the prosumer camera then, which is around 2,000 to 2,500 euros or dollars or whatever. Instead of getting up to the 50, 60 megapixel cameras, which is going to set you back an easy 4,000. And you can see it doesn't really gain you that much. But I still think these tests are kind of valuable to do, because it can make you stop wondering, what would the difference actually be? Is that something I need? So these models are both way oversampled. So it's going to be, you're going to lose a lot more detail before we're done with a model like this anyways. As a final thing, I thought I'd show you what 100 megapixels would look like. Now, this is not an actual 100 megapixel. I don't have a camera that can do that, not yet at least. However, what I did is in Lightroom, you can do the super resolution. So you can go from 50 up to, you can double it. And then I brought it down to 100. So that's what I got here. And you also get some denoising and some extra sharpening going on. And you can see there is an enormous amount of detail. So it does help a bit. It's, of course, a little bit hard to tell compared to the other one, because it was pretty good as well. But I do think I get a lot more fidelity here. There's like, you see every grain in the tree here. And this mushrooms are looking much better. The leaves are looking fantastic. So it does seem to work quite good, just upscaling it and sharpening it a bit and denoising it. It does do quite a lot. Let's see what we got here. We got 277 million. So that's quite a lot. And we got 15 8K textures out of this then. And as you can see, it looks fantastic. But still, well, who knows, maybe it's supposed to look like that. But yeah, there's going to be errors anyways. You just can't reach everywhere when you have a leafy mesh like this. But overall, I think this is looking even more fantastic. But now, if we weren't overkill before, now we're like super duper overkill. This is like, this is way more than you could ever dream of needing. And still can't get all the details out of this here, but it's pretty damn good. I do think these shapes here are looking a lot nicer than they did before. Well, I'm going to take some comparisons in Photoshop with this also. We're in Photoshop. This is the 100 megapixel version, and it's looking fantastic. Got amazing amounts of detail. Let's compare it to the 50. Well, I can see it's slightly sharper, but it's very diminishing returns at this point. But you can see a slight improvement. But let's see if we step down to the 24. Well, now you can really start to see then the step becomes quite a lot more. Do get... this actually looks almost a little bit low res compared to what we have here. Still, I have to think this is a very zoomed in image here of the mesh, so shouldn't judge it too harsh, but it's just that this looks absolutely amazing, and the creation time is not even that terrible. I actually did this 100 megapixel one because I wanted to see how my system would handle generating everything from something like 100 megapixel images, and it did pretty fine. It didn't struggle at all. It takes, of course, a bit longer, but nothing crazy. We're not talking days or anything. We're still just talking about a handful of minutes before it's done. So I'm happy with that. Now the meshing, of course, takes longer, but it's not anything that's completely a deal breaker or anything like that, and no crashes or anything. So that gets me thinking that maybe I should invest in a 100 megapixel camera for certain situations. Because the thing is, you can always shoot in 100 and then you can scale it down, right? Not that I'm probably ever going to do that, because that's not how my brain works. I want the maximum quality, so I'm probably going to have to suffer through it. And that's a little bit why I've stuck with the 24 megapixel for some time now, because then you're forced at shooting in that resolution and everything speeds up much more. If you have a 100 megapixel camera or 50, you are not very likely to want to be able to step down to 25 or something like that from a 50. So yeah, that's something to consider, that you do save a lot of time and money and the quality in the end. When you're done with everything, it's probably going to look exactly the same for most situations, I'm pretty sure. But let's see, I got one more here, this extreme zoomed in. And this would be... Yeah, yet again, it's a bit better. You get better shapes here, but it's definitely diminishing returns. But then compared to the 24, now this step is just too far, and you can see it's quite the huge difference between that. Anyways, I think these kind of tests are quite interesting. I like to do them from every now and then, just to see where I'm at, what kind of kit I need, and just to prevent myself from overbuying stuff. So my conclusion is that somewhere around the 24 megapixel is going to be enough for pretty much everything, even for extreme professional use. And if you want to step up to a 50 megapixel, make sure that it's got full IBIS and everything, because you don't want to trade in the IBIS and other conveniences for the higher resolution. It's not really worth it, in my opinion. More important things are things like a nice tilt-out screen, so you can get down low when you're shooting, and also a kind of a good grip, so that when you're holding it in portrait mode, you get a good grip. You don't feel like it's going to slip or anything like that. Those things are more important than high resolution, and of course the IBIS, and being able to shoot with a high dynamic range is also a very good thing. But most cameras are these days. If you just get a modern camera, they're all going to be the same. It's the same sensor. They're all manufactured by Sony anyways. So it's just that if you go up to the 100 megapixel ones, they have a slightly higher dynamic range than the full frame ones. With that said, there might be some more gains to get with getting a good lens. Now, what is a good lens? Well, that's probably a topic for another YouTube video. But quickly, I can say that almost all lenses you can buy that are kind of professional, that is not some China stuff, is going to be good enough. Because you're going to shoot it at 5.6 and f8, and all lenses becomes good when they are shot at that stop down. It's just when you shoot them wide open at f1.4 and things, that's when you can see the quality difference between the cheap lens and a high quality lens. That's where the hard part is. Now there is one more thing to consider, especially for us photogrammetrists, and that's the lens coating. Now the good coatings can be quite expensive, and you need it to control the blooming effect that you get when you shoot around an object, because you're always going to be moving around. There's always going to be a time when the sun is going to shine into the lens. And if you have a bad lens that doesn't control for this kind of stuff, it's going to bloom out the whole image, and you're going to lose a lot of contrast and detail, and those images are going to be almost unusable. So that's a very good thing to find a lens with some good coating. And usually then you have to step up in price. But like I said, I'm going to talk about that in another YouTube video at some point, see what we can find there. But that's something I noticed out in the field. It's almost the most important thing, because or else you only get like 2/3 of a model, and then the sun shines in and just blooms out everything. Now what you can do then is you have to wait maybe for the sun to move to another place, but that's not always what you can do. Anyways. Hope you enjoyed this little test. I hope I saved you a ton of money and get a 24 megapixel camera instead of a 50 megapixel camera, because I think that's where the sweet spot is. And if you're interested in seeing more about photogrammetry and Unreal Engine, why not like and subscribe, and I'll see you around next time.